Let's talk about UFC 313, man. I just got to quickly get your thoughts on this. What do you make of Fiziev stepping up and fighting Justin Gaethje here? Are you happy with all the options that were out there? It was obviously Beneil, there was Gamrot, there was potentially Armand was floating around at 160. Are you happy with where the UFC settled with Fiziev stepping in here?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, I'm excited to see the rematch anyway. Obviously, you know, Fiziev's he picked up another loss after that first fight that he had with Gaethje, and then he's been out injured. But I don't know it. The more I think about it, the more I can imagine how excited Fiziev is to get back in there with Gaethje. You know, because it was the last one was a weird one. I complained a bit about it in the build-up because I wanted it to be a 5-round fight. Like 3 rounds for these guys just doesn't feel like enough, and majority decision really kind of didn't feel like it was enough. You know, I wanted to see more from it, and then we've got this one which is another 3 rounds again, isn't it? But I feel like Fiziev's expectation of Gaethje is different this time around. Like, I think sometimes people fall into the trap with Justin Gaethje where they feel like he's like, you're going to get a brawl out of him. Oh yeah, we're fighting Justin Gaethje. It's going to be an absolute scrap. And I think Fiziev kind of started that first fight like, right, we're in the pocket. Let's go. We're going to stand here and we're going to trade punches and we're going to see who falls over first. And in actuality, Gaethje was quite erratic with his footwork. He was moving in and out of range and he was like feinting, and then like every time he went for like a low kick, he was really powering it up like not in a way that you can even block it. Like, you've just got to get out the way of it, otherwise the block's going to knock you off balance anyway. And it was just, I think it was a bit jarring for Fiziev. He didn't really get started, and then by the time he had kind of warmed into the fight and found his rhythm a bit, it was, you know, time was running out. My only concern, obviously, is that he's been out for a while and he's not 100%. But at the same time, I don't feel like he's that guy. I feel like he's, you know, as soon as he's able to get back moving and physical, he's back in the gym. He's back doing what he can, and the fact that he's going to be on, you know, in his mind going over that fight with Gaethje. What could I have tweaked? What could I have done differently that first round? So many things to learn from it. I think we'll get a different fight this time around. And maybe it makes up for a trilogy where we get a 5-rounder in the end of it.
It's interesting. In the first one, it's funny how Fiziev was able to get some success, right? But there was that eye poke. For those of the people that don't remember, there was an eye poke in the second round. It looked like it kind of killed off some of the momentum. And then in the third round, it seemed like Justin Gaethje was really able to pick up some reads on Fiziev because he was ducking his head down a lot when he was throwing those combos. And that's when we saw Gaethje really utilize those uppercuts. He started throwing a really crisp jab down the middle as well and sort of picking Fiziev's face apart. If you're Fiziev here, what kind of adjustments do you think you need to make? Obviously, he's going to have to change the way that his stance works because you don't want to be ducking down going into this rematch. But what other sort of key elements do you think he can make to really sort of have a good crack here at Justin Gaethje?
I mean, you know, I think he's got 2 ways of playing it. What he knows is not going to happen is Justin Gaethje's not going to stand in front of him and play Muay Thai, right? And that's what Gaethje did so well the last time around. Like, Fiziev likes to stand in that pocket where he's like, okay, we'll move around each other, but we won't move too much because why would we? Because we're going to duke it out. But because Gaethje kept crashing into range, it was like I mean, how many times did you see Fiziev throw shots where he was missing and punching air? And I just think he started the fight with such an uncomfortable tone that he never really kind of got caught up. I think that, you know, he's either got to pressure into Gaethje and he's got to use his footwork a bit more this time around. Instead of having the expectation that Gaethje is going to stand in front of you and engage, he's going to have to be more controlling with his footwork, maybe a little bit more bullying. I also think that he could play the same game that Gaethje was playing previously, where he moves in and out of range a bit more, instead of just trying to stand and you know, Iron Man it out like he's fighting Rodtang. Couple of different ways he could play it, but I certainly think clinch work could play into it as well, because we know that Gaethje does tend to drop his head defensively as well. And I feel like if Fiziev's kind of forcing a close range fight, that's where his whole Muay Thai game comes into play, and he might be able to catch Gaethje kind of rolling out with his head.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting when you see a guy who trains in Thailand and is predominantly does use Muay Thai, because you see guys throw a lot more set combinations. People don't know it's a little bit different to boxing, and that's what you see like Fiziev just being like 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, you know, like just throwing them with that, and that's why you see a lot of those punches missing. I am curious though, because we did see him land a couple of good shots on Gaethje. Gaethje was able to wear them, but we know he's coming back from that stoppage from Max Holloway. Do you think, is this the fight where we see Gaethje take shots and maybe not look the same? Do you think he's able to bounce back 100% after a stoppage like that? I mean, we've seen with fighters like Alex Volkanovski, that can change a fighter forever, right? It's really hard to tell how much damage you can take and how durable you are after being knocked out that badly. Like we saw the behind the scenes footage of it. Like, man, like Gaethje was out for quite some time.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I think really that's an area of the sport that, you know, we could be studying a bit more. I was actually thinking about it today when, or was it yesterday? I was watching Bobby Green get TKO'd, and I was timing how long he was on the floor for, and that was an uncomfortable stoppage, because that I felt like he took too many punches in that one, and then I started thinking to myself, maybe we should be tracking like how long these guys are staying down for, and
it's a good idea.
It seems to be so. It seems to be so random. Like, and I'm not going to mention any fighters' names, but I can think of particular fighters that from one fight to the next have been different. Like, there's been one particular bad TKO where they've taken a few too many shots, and I'm like, man, they're not the same as they were the last time I spoke to them at the start of their last training camp. And it doesn't happen often. You know, don't get me wrong, it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's terrible. And I don't know. I mean, you know, you look at Gaethje's early career, and he was known as that guy that was just like, let's bang. And people couldn't hang with him. They get chopped down by his low kicks and knocked out with his heavy hands. And his toughness was kind of part of the package, right? Mm-hmm. So then when he came into the UFC, there was this expectation that he was going to be this guy. He almost lost that first fight, if I remember correctly, and then he lost 2 on the bounce by just going to war with people. But for me, that was the point where his career took the right turn. Like, he started to be way more calculated with his delivery systems, you know, his ability to put people on the end of his punches instead of just punching enough so something landed. And I feel like, you know, he's had a few fights where he's actually been really quite calculated, but, you know, you've got to think that damage does catch up to you. And I don't know whether, you know, there is a point where you immediately become more susceptible to it or not. I certainly don't think that Gaethje's got the expectation that he can just walk through stuff anymore. I think those first couple of losses in the UFC were that turning point for him. So I don't think he's not going to get a tattoo like the damage across his chest or anything like that. You know, I think he's more calculated than that. But that doesn't mean to say that he's not going to feel the effects. Again, you know, fight IQ comes into play here for Gaethje, and not standing in the pocket and trading. Maybe even surprise everybody and use his wrestling a little bit, but you know, that might be a bridge too far.
It's funny, he did try to kind of use a little bit of wrestling against Fiziev in the first one, right? But Fiziev was able to sort of stop those takedowns and sort of keep the fight standing. And yeah, exactly like you said, it's interesting, like doing the count and seeing how long they stay down. I definitely think all of that needs to be brought into account. But let's just say, you know, Fiziev wins, or even Justin Gaethje. What do you think is next for the winner? Because this 155 division is insane, right? Like, you got Ilia vacating his belt just to go to a division with no title shot locked in, which is crazy to me. Like, we don't see that happening every day. And then we've got Charles Oliveira, we've got Armin, we've got Dan Hooker floating around. We've got all sorts of fighters just waiting for their crack at the belt, or getting a fight to get a crack at the belt. How would you sort of book out the division if it was up to you? And who do you think gets the next title shot?
Man, they're all good. They're all good questions. You know, it's hard to say, because you know, ultimately, I mean, I'm not in the mindset of the matchmakers, and a lot of it really, especially more now than ever, seems to be down to what regions they're going into and who's going to get the opportunities next. And I don't know. I don't know. It's a very, very difficult division, but I do feel like the younger generation is going to start to sweep through soon. You know, I mean, and Toporia's shifting through weight classes as well is quite exciting, because I feel like he's got He's got good speed, and it's not a massive jump compared to, say, lightweight to welterweight or welterweight to middle. This is a more manageable step for him. And the other thing as well that I don't like is when fighters stay in their weight class for too long and they kind of, I don't know, their body looks underdeveloped a little bit. And I feel like, Topuria is making the right move here. So I feel like he could be a real problem, with his neck attacks and the speed of his hands. Certainly to watch out for. I don't know,
he
to be
could
honest.
beat Islam? You think Topuria could beat Islam?
I'm not sure whether we're going to see their paths cross. I feel like Islam's already kind of moving towards the welterweight division anyway. I mean, every time I see him, he looks bigger and leaner. And I feel like he's going to start to feel his performance is going to suffer a little bit because of the size of him now.
It's fascinating though, because of those guys too. It's one of those things where, Khabib had his Conor McGregor rival, and I feel like Ilia Topuria, he's come around a little bit late, but this is the big feud that Islam's been missing in his 155 run. If those two guys do fight, do you think that Ilia Topuria would be able to utilize his grappling skills against someone that's so dangerous in Ilia Topuria? And then comparably with Islam, his striking has gotten a bit better. Do you think he could be a threat to Ilia? Because we've seen guys like Alex Pereira be very successful with things like leg kicks against Topuria in the past.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Islam right now is head and shoulders above everybody else. Topuria is a fantastic fighter, but even if they were matched evenly skill for skill, the size and conditioning of Makhachev, and his position as a champion, of course, of course, he was kind of in Khabib's shadow for a long time, but he was being prepared to be that champion for a long time. And I always said, I know his record's not perfect, but that one knockout loss made him a much better striker than the vast majority of other fighters in his gym. Like everybody around him. Like obviously, I was out in Dubai recently with the Usman Paul Hughes fight, and everybody in the camp talks so highly of Islam. It's like you can't even suggest who's the best in the gym. You wouldn't even ask that question. You know what I mean? It's like that he's treated the same as Khabib was when he was still active. Like you wouldn't even question whether he's the best in the gym. There's no doubt about it. And like you see Islam when you compare him to these other guys in the gym that are fighting in the same weight as him, and he just looks so much physically dominant and not only has he integrated that wrestling style in, but I feel like his striking's taken on a new level. And I feel like he's right at that very limit where if he gains another couple of pounds, he's not going to be able to make 155 anymore. I just wonder how much longer he's got in this division. I would feel that Topuria is going to be able to make featherweight longer than Makhachev's going to be able to make lightweight. So I don't know how long this rivalry is going to last, if that makes sense.
Do you think that, and obviously those guys are teammates, and Belal, he's done some really impressive work in the UFC just to reach the belt, just to be able to become champion, the long road that he had. But do you think if they fought tomorrow, would you pick Islam to beat Belal at welterweight?
Yeah. Yeah, I would. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really. There are very few welterweights. Leon Edwards, I think, would be a hell of a fight for Makhachev, because his game is kind of like the antithesis, right? He can play on the outside and he can set traps and walk you onto things, and he's got excellent takedown defense as well. People really, have really started to realize how good Leon's takedown defense. That's the kind of skill set that you would need to be problematic for Makhachev, as well as the fact that Leon's got such long limbs as well for his weight. Again, a problem that Makhachev's potentially not gonna find himself up against at lightweight because of his his size in the division. But I really feel like and imagine this, like he's been stifling his body for how many years to stay close to this weight class. If he gave himself 6 months of doing nothing and sitting around and eating that awesome barbecue food that I always see him cooking on the countdown shows, he's going to be a massive welterweight before no time at all. So I'm excited for the rest of his career. I feel like he's got a bright future at welterweight, and I'm glad I'm out of that division. Let me tell you.
Hey, let me ask you, man. Obviously, we've got Ankalaev. He's stepping up now to fight Pereira. But in the build up to this, it's obviously Ramadan, right? And that makes things interesting for Ankalaev, who can't eat during parts of the day and has to sort of abstain till the later parts of the day, I think. I'm not 100% sure how it all works, but do you think that this could be an effect? Like, from your perspective, as you're getting ready for a fight, how important is having the perfect nutrition at the right time and being able to recharge, being able to refuel at the right time as you're sort of finishing off your training camp and going into the fight? Do you think this could be a detractor for someone like Ankalaev in the biggest fight of his career?
You know, it's a fascinating question, and we briefly touched on it today, Veronica and I, on the podcast, but we didn't really dig into it. Honestly, I feel like I could talk for a good while about it. Not only because it's a fascinating situation that he's in, where, you know, he's never fought through Ramadan before, and potentially if it wasn't a title fight, maybe he would have turned the fight down. You know, there's a, you know, this is a special circumstance where he's putting himself in this circumstance. But at the same time, you know, I thought the Countdown Show interview with him was really fascinating. People can do incredible things with self-belief, right? People can do incredible things with self-belief. Now, if I'm looking at this from an athlete's perspective, I'm thinking to myself, right, so he's gonna weight cut to make 205, and I don't know how much he cuts, but even if it's 5 pounds, which it's definitely not, it's going to be more than that. He's going to need to rehydrate and refuel afterwards.
Yeah.
And if he's adhering to Ramadan, to my understanding, he won't be able to eat or drink during daylight hours. And it sounds to me on the Countdown Show that he's gonna practice Ramadan as he normally would, and go without food and drink. So from an athletics perspective, I think to myself, wow, he's not going to be fueled properly, and, you know, then he's going to be waiting till, you know, the evening on weigh-in day to start refueling, and then on fight day he won't be eating anything either. Like, what kind of situation does that put him in? And physiologically, I had one particular fight where I was driving around on fight day to get medicals to get cleared, and I didn't eat anything, and it played on my mind. But is that going to play on his mind? Of course it's not going to play on his mind, because he gained strength from his discipline. And this is where I find it really, really interesting is, yes, if you look at it from an athletic perspective, you want him to be rehydrated and refueled, et cetera, et cetera. But because of the situation in which he's going into this, I feel like the strength of mind that he's getting from it's going to offset any kind of potential doubt or even, you know, physiological detriment to not being fully fueled. Honestly, I've been thinking about it quite a lot. I feel like it's a really interesting conversation to have, and I really don't know. I would have to have a conversation with him and maybe see if he felt any different going into the fight, or if he felt any different performing, you know, depending on how long the fight goes.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like, it's all a lot of fighting is a mental game. And yeah, like you said, maybe that gives him that extra fire, that extra special sauce to get this done, because this isn't going to be an easy task. Let me ask you about the fight. We know that Ankalaev needs to get Pereira down to the ground to win this fight. He can't stay on the feet with him for too long. How do you sort of see his game plan in getting Alex Pereira down? Because Pereira has gotten better at stuffing takedowns. He's not the easiest guy to get down. How hard do you think it's actually going to be for Ankalaev to execute this game plan and get him down to the ground long enough to be effective and win this fight?
Yeah, again, you know, it's a good question. I'm going to quote the Diaz brothers here. Someone's been selling wolf tickets, and I'm not really sure who it is. like, and it might just be our ignorance and assumptions as MMA fans, as we go, oh well, he's from Dagestan, so he's definitely going to wrestle. And in actuality, like, if you look at the stats, if you watch Ankalaev's fights, he really is a striker. He's a striker in MMA. He doesn't train with Khabib and all the you know, the heavy wrestling crew. I mean, first of all, he's a lot bigger than those guys anyway, but the vast majority of his game is based on his striking, and he's a very, very good striker. So I feel in his mind, taking this fight to the ground is secondary. I feel like that's something that that's a narrative that we've associated with this fight because, well, Ankalaev's going to be the one that takes him down because he's from Dagestan. And well, we listen to his name, he's called Magomed. You know what I mean? And I think we're discrediting actually what his game plan's going to be, which is going to be to stand and trade with Pereira. I think he's going to play a long game. He's going to have a long stance, and he's going to try and, pot shot him, utilize his body kicks and really approach this fight like he's going to be the better striker. Now, don't get me wrong. I think if it starts to go wrong for him, which it may well do in the first few minutes, then I definitely think that there might be some wrestling attempts there. But then, just off the top of my head, he goes for less than one takedown per 15 minutes, 0.92.
That's right. Yeah.
His success rate is what, 31%. You know what I mean?
Is,
So even
31%,
compare that with the other guys, like they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling takedown attempts as well as accuracy. So I don't know. I think Pereira is going to be able to stuff his takedowns. I think he's going to be able to stay on the feet or at least get back to his feet safely. And I think this is going to be a striking match until Pereira potentially gets his number. But yeah, I'm just not sold on the wrestling thing. I don't know. I don't really think in Ankalaev's mind, he's like, why would I wrestle? I'm a striker,
Yeah, look, you're not lying. When I spoke to Ali Abdelaziz, his prediction was Ankalaev was going to knock Pereira out. And it is interesting because with Pereira and his striking style, he is there to be hit, right? Like a big part of his style is he moves forward, takes the space away from his opponents, and almost gets them to throw their best shots. Then just basically those shots do nothing. Then he just stands in front of them and goes on to absolutely dismantle them. Like he's basically, Freddy Krueger or whatever. Like he's like one of those guys from the horror movies that just slowly moves forward to you until you realize there's no outcome except for death, Dan Hardy. So when it comes to but with that, he gives his opponents a chance to land their shots, right? And we saw with Khalil Roundtree, we've seen with people, they've been able to land. We saw with Israel Adesanya, he was able to counter shot him and win that fight. What are you expecting from this one? Do you think Ankalaev has the ability to put Alex Pereira out, I guess, because that's the only way you're going to do it, or it'll hurt him enough to jump on him on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, for sure he does. Absolutely he does. Look, Adesanya is not a big puncher, and Adesanya put him away. And Khalil, Khalil landed a beautiful left hook on him, but that to me kind of illustrates the point. And same as with the Adesanya stoppage. I feel like the only way that Pereira is gonna get caught is if he leaves himself open, and the only way he leaves himself open is if he doesn't take this person in front of him as a real threat, right? Like I think he expected Khalil to be tough, but he came out with a flying stomp kick. And then when he got dropped, he had his back to Khalil. He'd done an attack and spun all the way through. And as soon as he kind of got that silliness out of his system, he kind of settled into the fight a bit. And then he was just kind of traditional Pereira. And like you say, he does. He edges forward and he has quite a wide guard. So he feels quite overbearing. So a lot of the wide stuff that's coming around is not getting through because it's all kind of deflecting off his force field. And then anything comes down the center is food for him to slip and counter. So you're like, you kind of don't feel like you can do anything. And that really kind of plays into his hands, the fact that Ankalaev is not really a volume striker either. He tends to pot shot and pick with single shots, which is going to make it easier for Pereira to look for his counters because there's less volume and less confusion. And the one other thing I will say, like the stance difference between the two, like Pereira's back foot is always trying to edge forward into the fight, whereas Ankalaev, he leaves his back foot behind. And the worst thing about that, obviously, is that calf kick, which Pereira just decimates people with. And I feel like, Ankalaev is going to take 2 or 3 of those calf kicks. He's going to have to switch his stance to the opposite side where he's not as comfortable. And then the rest of his game starts to fall apart. I'll be interested to see if he comes up with something that gets inside Pereira's game. But I feel like Pereira's got the respect for Ankalaev to go, I'm going to give him my A game and I'm not going to take my eyes off the prize, because that's really when he gets himself in danger. Like if you're up against Adesanya and the whole fight is playing out exactly like it did the last time you stopped him, it's almost like you're rereading the same script until that big shot comes over the top and knocks you out. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of complacency has caught him a couple of times. And I don't think he's going to be in that mindset with Ankalaev.
All right, guys, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, MANSCAPED, who make this podcast possible. I'm, of course, talking about the Chairman Plus, the electric foil shaver by MANSCAPED, placing the power of a barber-quality shave in the palm of your hand. Whether you're suiting up for the boardroom, getting ready for a date, or setting the stage for cupping season, the Chairman Plus delivers professional-grade performance tailored to your style. It's luxury reinvented for the modern man who demands more. Ready to step up? Why not join the trusted movement? Over 12 million men. Visit manscaped.com now. Use the code word submission. Get 20% off and free shipping now, and you keep this podcast going. You support this show and you support yourself. Just quickly, what makes the Chairman Plus stand out? Well, it's all about versatility and precision. It comes with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, uses 3-blade foil for a close, smooth shave, has skin-safe technology to help reduce razor burn, and of course, the Chairman Plus is waterproof, so it lets you shave right in the shower. And by the way, how about this? 60 minutes of runtime on a single charge, so you're sorted no matter where you go. Manscaped also has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so why not try it risk-free? Use the code word submission. 20% off and free shipping today. Risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Manscaped keeps this show alive and keeps your dating life and your smoothness alive too. Jump on Manscaped right now. And guys, I just want to talk to you about our other sponsors, SAILY. SAILY is a groundbreaking eSIM that has you sorted wherever you go in the world. Super low prices, super easy to use. All you got to do is download this app. Have a look at me. I'm in the app. I choose the destination to where I need to go. Boom, click a couple of buttons and I'm set. Forget about taking out your SIM card. Forget about lining up in long lines at the airport. Forget about having to change your phone number and everything about your phone. SAILY has you sorted. It's easy, it's simple. It comes with all the security features that you need. Why not just use the amount of money that you need for the destination that you need without having to sign up to crazy plans that go for months at a time that you have to get out of, or paying per day crazy amounts of money and coming back at the end of the holiday to having to take out a loan just to pay off the amount of money that you spent on the holiday using your phone. So do this right now. Go to saily.com/submission or click the link in the bio below. Get 15% off your first purchase with the code word submission. That's 15% off your first purchase with the code word submission. Get SAILY in your life and change it forever. And now, back to the program. Yeah, it's interesting though, man. He was in Sydney for UFC 312. He was doing dinners and seminars. And we all know with Alex Pereira, he's in this mode where he knows he's not going to be around for long. So he's cashing in as much as he can on his name value, on his title. Ankalaev, on the other hand, you know, we haven't seen anything really from him on social media. The guy's just been like laser focused on this fight. This is the biggest moment of his career. And with Alex Pereira, though, everywhere he goes, every place he goes, everyone always brings up Ankalaev. Well, there's Ankalaev. Ankalaev is going to be the guy. Ankalaev, people saying Ankalaev is the future of the division. But if you had to sort of feel it out of everything that we've broken down, are you siding with an Ankalaev upset here, or do you think Alex Pereira gets it done?
No, I think Pereira gets it done. I do. I feel like perhaps this might be the turning point in Ankalaev's game where he really, you know, starts to round out his game and utilize the rest of his MMA. I feel like he's still very much in his mindset. He's a striker that has wrestling as a backup, and I think that might be the downfall for him. And I also think I can't underestimate Alex Pereira's takedown offense as well. Like, if you've got someone who's an elite level striker and you want to give them a game that's going to work as quickly as possible, I can't think of a better person than Glover Teixeira, right? We've talked about this before, right? The Glover Teixeira foundational game that worked into his 40s against elite level fighters that were way younger than him. Like, he knows that the basic things to give Pereira without giving him all of the fluff, you know, octopus guard, donkey guard, rolling for ankle locks, this and that. And he doesn't need any of that. He needs the bare bones basics to get himself back to a position where he can knock people out. I just feel like I agree with what you're saying. You know, it is a tremendous schedule that he's keeping right now. But I also feel like at this point in his career, he's finally reaping the rewards of all the fights that he's had. You know, so everywhere he goes, yeah, everyone's saying Ankalaev, but they're also saying, you're the man, we love you. And I think that's really feeding him right now. And you know, you can ride those wheels for too long, and I think it will. The fatigue would catch up with him. Um, I just don't think it's this fight. I feel quite confident that Pereira is going to get the job done here. And I think we might see Ankalaev regroup and have another shot in 2 or 3 fights time.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen to the division after this. I want to jump to the fan questions quickly before we wrap, because this sort of starts it off nicely. Stephen goes, will we ever see Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones, or Aspinall keep fighting other contenders? I bring this up to you, Dan, because Tom Aspinall just said recently on his YouTube channel, still no news on Jon Jones. Apparently he signed up to the fight, nothing from Jon Jones. Of course, if Alex Pereira wins here, what do you think? Is he going to be moved up to heavyweight to fight Aspinall? What's your read on the situation?
I mean, I certainly think we'll see Pereira at heavyweight. I just don't see any reason why he wouldn't. You know, he's still making light heavyweights look really small, and I feel like he's got a skill set like Jon Jones that would transfer quite well to heavyweight. Do I think we'll see Jon Jones fight Tom Aspinall? Honestly, right now, I don't think we will. No, and that's disappointing because, you know, for win or lose, I would love to see Jones step in there and at least give Tom Aspinall the respect to have a shot, you know, because, I mean, Stipe's just done it for Jon. You know, a lot of fighters fought Jon towards the end of their career when they didn't need to, Rampage, etc., etc. You know, at some point there is a changing of the guard, and it's fine if you just want to kick it in the division and fight whoever, but if you want to hold the gold, you've got to defend it against the next best guy. And there's no doubt that's Tom. I just don't see why Jon Jones would. I think, honestly, I think he's more likely to get elected to the Trump White House than to defend against Tom Aspinall. He just seems to be doing everything but thinking about that fight right now.
Man, imagine that fight never comes together though. It's one of those ones like Fedor and Randy Couture and, you know, Fedor, Brock Lesnar, or some of the big fights we never got the chance to see. Tony Ferguson, Khabib. Let me ask you this, man. If Alex Pereira does win here, do you think that's the last fight for him at light heavyweight? Because just looking through the rankings, like, there's not really that many fights for him to have. But the DDP fight, DDP's got to go through Hamzat first before he moves up. Just doesn't look like there's that many challenges for him. So do you think the UFC just throws the cash at him and just makes this Aspinall fight next if Jones says no International Fight Week, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kicking through my head. I'm trying to think who else you would have at light heavyweight that would be interesting for him.
I mean, do you do a rematch with Roundtree if he gets through? If he gets through Jamal, do you? I mean, Yuri, it's like, I don't think you can do another Yuri fight anytime too soon. No. I'm just having a look through the rankings right now. What we've got, Jan Blachowicz, he's in there. Yuri, Ankalaev. You've got a couple of exciting opportunities. Like you got, Carlos Ulberg, but he's still got to win a few more fights. I think a couple more fights. There's really actually no one.
Yeah. And did you say Khalil's matched? He's matched, is he, right now?
Khalil Roundtree, yep. He's going to be fighting Jamal Hill. That just got announced.
See, that's an obvious one. I think the winner of that is probably the only person left. And Ulberg's a good shout, but I agree. He's still a little bit green, although he does very much look like one of the future stars in the division. Yeah, I mean, we might get one more fight. We might get the Hill rematch or the Roundtree rematch, and then see him move up a weight class. But ultimately, I mean, he's 37, so even the UFC must be realistic in thinking we've probably got 3-4 more quality fights out of him. And if Jones is stepping away, the UFC don't have any other option really. It's got to be Aspinall versus Pereira, because they then need another big star to validate Tom Aspinall. Not that Tom's not a big star, but of course, that was the whole point in the Jones-Stipe fight, wasn't it? Was to validate Jones as a heavyweight. But then Jones is, of course, not going to play that game. And, and why would he, right? It's always easier if you Jon Jones to retire on a, well, what if? He might have beat me, but you can't prove it, But, this is where sometimes the, fighters aren't very smart and we stick around for too long. Maybe Jon Jones is one of the smart ones and he gets out, before the bullet catches him.
Or maybe Jon Jones is like, hey, maybe Pereira fights Aspinall next. Who knows? maybe
And then I'll
Pereira
pick
beats Aspinall, and then I fight Pereira, right? Like Jon Jones has always been the kind of guy that can actually, he's very strategic in the octagon and outside of the octagon. Let me ask you this though: if Pereira does fight Aspinall's already said, man, I ain't standing around with Pereira. I'm shooting him. I'm doing a rugby tackle to this guy. I'm getting him to the ground. And, Aspinall is extremely dangerous on the ground. He's not one of these guys that's just going to take you down for the sake of it. If he gets you down to the ground, he's working for a sub or he's beating the crap out of you. So in saying that, is there a scenario in your mind that you think Pereira beats Aspinall, or do you heavily lean towards Tom Aspinall winning if that is the next fight for Pereira?
I mean, I'd be 70-30 in Tom Aspinall's favor. I think, I think he's got the speed to compete with Pereira. I also think he's got the size, and in the way that Tom Aspinall fights, he's not going to be a comfortable style matchup for Pereira. Like, Jiří Procházka's one thing, but Tom Aspinall flying your best part of 270 pounds. Like, even if you block those shots or slip them, something's going to catch you and knock you off balance. And then that's not even counting the ground game. Tom is a big, powerful individual that if he gets Pereira to the floor, it would be a tremendous amount of energy for him to get back to his feet, even if he's successful. Of course, Pereira could touch anybody on the channel on the planet and knock him out. But if you're looking for a real legit heavyweight contender for Tom, maybe I'm a broken record, but it has to be Ngannou. There isn't anybody else really. I don't see any other fight that really gets me excited. Like, I can point at that person and say it's the heavyweight king. And I don't even think I could say that if it was Jones versus Aspinall at this point, because I don't feel like Jones he's potentially number 3 in the heavyweight division right now behind Ngannou and Aspinall. But we'll see what happens. Tom's certainly the future of the division. I just don't know whether he's going to get that crowning moment before he starts his real reign as the champ.
You just hate to see a guy in his prime sitting around waiting for a fight that probably isn't going to happen, and they're not really getting his flowers. And you got to admit as well, like, someone else in Tom Aspinall's position might even just be like, hey, give me Pereira, let's just fight now, because that's so much money. But he wants the tougher fight, in Jon Jones. And if Francis Ngannou was around, he'd want the tougher fight in Francis Ngannou. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, let's reward the guys that deserve to be rewarded. Just quickly, fan question here: who do you think wins a fight between prime Alex Gustafsson and Alex Pereira? And I'm just going off the back of a chat I had with Luke Thomas maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, where he said, listen, all respect to Alex Pereira, but if you go back to that era of 205, when you had your Alexander Gustafsson, your DC, your Jon Jones, all sorts of other guys in that division, Pereira probably is not champion. So I wonder, how do you think a prime Alexander Gustafsson would do against an Alex Pereira if they fought today?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I always held Gustafsson in really high regard, especially the beautiful uppercuts that he used against Teixeira. But ultimately, you look at his fight against Anthony Johnson, rest his soul, and everyone's susceptible to getting caught with a clean shot. And Anthony Johnson used to be a welterweight. You know what I mean? So like someone with Pereira's size and skill, I still feel like he could have competed in that division. DC would have been the biggest problem for him. There's no doubt, because that would have taken Pereira years and years of wrestling training to deal with. And obviously, Jon Jones in his prime as well would have been, obviously even now would be a handful for Pereira. But Gustafsson, I don't know. I feel like that would have been a pretty even fight for Pereira. I don't know as I would have seen Gustafsson. I mean, he took Jon Jones down more out of surprise than anything. It wasn't like he was a dominant wrestler. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was going to be able to out grapple Pereira. I feel like he would have very much kind of played into that type of game. So I don't know. I mean, styles make matchups ultimately, and DC's the one that would have been the real problem in the division because of his style of fighting. But no, I think Pereira could have had a good fight against Gustafsson.
All right, guys, and there it is. That is the breakdown with Dan Hardy for UFC 313. A big thanks to him. I decided to break down our chat into 2 videos. So if you haven't watched the first one, check it out right now. It's where we break down a bunch of other topics unrelated to UFC 313 that I thought could be interesting. And of course, a big thanks to Dan Hardy. Make sure to watch out for what happens next with him with Misfits Boxing and of course PFL. The man has taken over this place And for all your UFC 313 action and coverage, make sure you stay tuned to Submission Radio. More stuff coming at you. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.